So it's been a few weeks since we said our final goodbyes to Black Sabbath at their last ever gig on the 5th of July. And for me it started off as an absolute blast down memory lane, thinking about the albums and bands I was shown growing up from a time long before mine, reflecting some of the true legends that came from the 1960s and 70s to kick off some of the biggest genres in current rock, alongside influencing other bands that now hold legendary status themselves. So in respect of saying goodbye to Black Sabbath as the final chapter in their book closes, couldn't help myself but take a further look at the past, present and future for Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne and also heavy metal itself. So first taking it back to a time around 20 years before I was born, in 1970, things were cooking in Birmingham as Ozzy, Tommy, Butler and Old Bill smashed out two instant classic albums in the new rock scene, sitting with bands like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, exploring a new era of rock music post the Beatles' hype, with their debut album Black Sabbath remaining an album I will always go back to and still adore, especially the fact that even the heaviest rock album in 1970 still contained a harmonica, with The Wizard probably being my favourite Black Sabbath song that also hinted at future songs in its progression sounding very similar to War Pigs, with War Pigs coming on Black Sabbath's huge album Paranoid, their second album, which was also released in 1970 as well, and still contains some of the band's most popular work like War Pigs, Iron Man and the title track Paranoid. And I always loved the story that Ozzy tells about how when he first heard Tony's riff for Iron Man, he said it sounded like a big iron bloke, leading to the title Iron Man, and also that he had no idea what the sci-fi nonsense in Iron Man's lyrics were about. It showed how creative the culmination of the band was, and how Ozzy gave such a convincing performance to an idea which really wasn't his bag of cats. But those first two albums made a huge impression on bands previously mentioned, with a huge amount of respect between bands like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, praising each other and having this kind of mutual healthy competition, whilst other band members like Roger Waters of Pink Floyd was not a fan of calling it, and I quote, a bit of a mess and total crap. Not too sure about that. Proving that even since their heyday, from the moment they came on the scene, Black Sabbath were dividing opinion in both the public and their peers alike. Although I'd probably value Led Zeppelin's opinion on music way more than anyone else, so they had the right frame of mind. And as Black Sabbath moved through the years, seeing huge disputes resulting in Ozzy being kicked from the band and replaced with Dio, we still had some pretty interesting memories to call on, with the huge rotating roster in the band, alongside Ozzy himself in his solo career, producing some of the most iconic heavy metal songs of all time, with tunes like Crazy Train, No More Tears and Mr. Crowley becoming iconic in themselves, blurring the lines between if Black Sabbath or Ozzy was more iconic, especially following Ozzy on his own celebrity status with the Osbournes and shows in more recent years, and a personal favourite of mine, Osbourne's I Want to Believe, which in my opinion is one of the best shows in existence, where they show Ozzy and Sharon a bunch of videos of ghosts and UFOs and ask for their opinions before Ozzy gets bored and goes to sleep. Yet there were over the years things like Ozfest and Ozzy having to cancel various shows that made it always feel like this time with Black Sabbath was never truly concluded, and an air of irritation still lingered in parts, worrying everyone as time went on. However, times change, friendships are mended, and every piece of success in every single argument or dispute led to the huge event that was the final ever gig for Black Sabbath, to give one last goodbye on their home turf for taking it all back to the beginning, featuring huge stars of the genre Black Sabbath had helped create, coming back to form supergroups or perform on their own to pay homage to the kings that were Black Sabbath. And well, I sadly did not get tickets, and I'm incredibly jealous of those that did, yet it didn't stop me from watching every single piece of content I could about the day. And Lord, we gotta give a few honourable mentions, like Steve Tyler, coming out on stage at 77 years old and blasting out some insane vocals, and to be fair, looking pretty youthful, smashing out a great rendition of Whole Lotta Love, and certainly it got my approval, not that it matters much. And to give it to him, Ozzy and Sharon's newly adopted son, Youngblood, certainly gave an absolute belting performance of Changes, proving he was comfortable on the biggest of stages and giving a performance that felt like one truly out of love for Ozzy and Black Sabbath rather than one that was demanding attention for himself. As Youngblood has been a bit on and off in my mind for me, this really once again made me like him a lot more though, alongside other veterans and now legends themselves, Metallica and Guns N' Roses showing up for the big day and all getting cozy pictures with Ozzy after. And well, when it was time for the final big show, Black Sabbath delivered something that was certainly worthy of their last time. Even with Ozzy bound to his awesome throne, he was still able to command a presence that shows performing isn't always about jumping around, going crazy and insane high energy. Sometimes a presence and reputation can build over the decades, and it's enough to have everyone's eyes on you, surrounded by some of the best musicians to come out of a genre they created, with the whole band sounding on point and saying a big old goodbye and good night. So what holds for the future future now this is all done? Well, heavy metal has changed a lot over the years, and to be honest, even when you do revisit those early Black Sabbath albums that helped kick off the genre of heavy metal, they don't sound that heavy by comparison to what we get today, and that's natural. It shows that there's been a massive development and creative adaptation for new bands still entering the scene and still creating new stuff. And I'm hopeful we can continue to hear more new projects and get new artists out there, where we've seen huge characters like Youngblood, who aren't really a heavy metal artist, fit very comfortable into the scene, and it'd be interesting to see what they do in the future. For now, it's time for other legends to take the mantle as the torch has been passed, probably with bands like Metallica to truly take the reins as the long-serving legends, as ones that others can now look up to for the long term, even though they'd already done that for a number of years, obviously. It's fair to say Black Sabbath has changed a lot over the decades after the huge impact on the scene with their first two albums, between different band members and Ozzy's solo career. Yet for me, this huge final farewell gig really did tie everything off and package up their legacy and story in a fantastic way. But be sure to let me know what you thought about the final day, and on a whole for Black Sabbath and their impact on the heavy metal scene. Yet as always, take care out there, and I'll see you on the next one. Ta-ra for now.